Hey guys, and welcome to this week's small group. Now we're going to be asking the question, what role do we play in this whole theology of work? And the answer is that good work gives a glimpse into the way things could be. You see, when we study the theology of work, it's easy to feel so out of control because it seems as though cosmic forces have taken control of our work from us. For instance, God was the one who created everything from the very beginning. And then Adam and Eve were the ones who messed it all up for all of us. And then God is going to be the one to do the restoration. And so what role do we play? So let's start out with these two questions. What are the things we do not have control of at work? And what are the things that we do have control of at work? This week, we are going to see how the way we do our work can actually change eternity. What I want you to do is read John chapter 9, verses 1 through 5. Describe in your own words the false theology that the disciples were expressing in this passage. And how do people in our day and age sometimes express that exact same theology? The theology that they were wrestling with is that if you are suffering, you must have done something wrong. I can't tell you how many people think that they are paying for being naughty when they were younger when they go through bad times today. God is punishing me for the bad things that I did years ago. But that is a completely false theology. God is not a vindictive God. In fact, sometimes there are consequences for what we do, but God is not hunting you down to make you pay for some unrelated sin. That is the antithesis to the concept of grace. So what exactly was the work of God in this blind man's life? And to whom would this work be displayed? Who is Jesus inviting to do God's work along with him in this passage? And does this invitation extend to us? Next, we get to see the regular people's response to this work of God. Read John chapter 9, verses 6 through 12. Was the man who was formerly blind the only person to benefit from this work of God? And why? Now we get to see the Pharisees' reaction to this work of God. Read John chapter 9, verses 13 through 17. Why was it such an important detail that Jesus did this work of God on a Sabbath? And what was the theology that the Pharisees held that prevented them from believing this miracle? You see, the Pharisees believed that godly people did not do any work on the Sabbath. If you were a doctor and somebody broke their arm on the Sabbath, the doctor would have to wait until the next day to set your arm. If you did any work on the Sabbath, you were the opposite of godly. You were a sinner. And so they had this conundrum going on. Here's this seemingly godly miracle that happened, but it was done on the Sabbath. So read John chapter 9, verses 8 through 23. Why was it important for them to bring in the formerly blind man's parents? And why were the parents so afraid? Well, now things are about to get ugly or exciting based on how you view confrontation. I personally love the next few passages, and I fall in love with the formerly blind man every time that I read them. So read John chapter 9, verses 24 through 34. It's exciting. What were the two things that the formerly blind man said that infuriated the Pharisees? And what theology did the Pharisees finally revert back to before kicking him out. You know, being kicked out of the temple or the synagogue was a big deal. You were considered a sinner, and the rest of society would treat you accordingly. This poor guy was waiting his whole life to be able to see, and then on the day that he's finally cured, he is treated horribly. It truly was the best and the worst day of his life. But the next scene is a heartwarming moment with Jesus. Read John chapter 9, verses 35 through 41. God did two works in the blind man's life that day. He healed his blindness, but what was the other work? And which work was more important, and why? Jesus gave people a glimpse into what heaven would be like when he cured the man's blindness. Jesus gave people a glimpse into what it was going to be like in heaven when nobody was blind. So how can you give people a glimpse into heaven when you do your specific work well? If you're a doctor, you're giving people a glimpse into the way things are going to be like when nobody is sick. If you're in the food industry and you do a good job, you're giving people a glimpse into the way things are going to be when nobody's hungry. And so how does your specific job or specific work help to give a glimpse of heaven? Our final question for this small group is, what is one thing that you can do differently at work this week that will allow you to give others a glimpse into heaven? Then I want you to close in prayer. Ask God to change our perspective on the work that we do. And remember, good work gives a glimpse into the way things could be. God bless the rest of your small group. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you for the next small group.